We are here to talk about attorneys on Zoom. This is very difficult. If you've competed in mock trial before, you're used to standing when the judge walks in. At least for me, when the judge walks in the door and you stand up and you throw the fake smile and you're ready to go, that kind of signals to me, gets me ready to perform in a round. And it's a lot different now. A judge just kind of pops in and all of a sudden you're good to go. So we're going to talk about some tips and tricks to get you in the feeling of being in the courtroom, pretending like you're the attorney, acting like an attorney, and what we can do to make this Zoom mock the best it can. A lot of these tips carry from attorneys to witnesses. Eye contact, look at the camera, put a picture next to your camera if you have to. Look at the camera, not the judge on the screen when you're trying to present evidence. You have to be very, very aware of your tone and pace and volume. You've got to test this out. If you get in a Zoom room and you're sitting very close to your laptop, if you're using the internal microphone, it's going to be a lot louder than if all of a sudden for a cross, you want to stand up and you're far away. So you've got to know these kinds of things. When you're testing it out, check your camera angle. If you're going to sit down, put your laptop on a couple of books or binders so it's level with you so you can look at it instead of looking down or looking up. And you have to, I think one of the biggest things here is what I'm looking for, and I'm judging rounds nowadays, or when I'm in rounds, what I really appreciate seeing is attorneys who take control, who can say, here's the technical issue, judge, we're trying to fix it, and you take control of it. You're not thrown off because, the judges are going through the same thing that you're going through. So if an attorney is going through a cross-examination and the witness cuts out, it's on the attorney to say, excuse me, sir, I didn't get that. Your internet cut out. Please repeat your answer for the record. So, because you need to be aware of what's going on. You need to make clear what's going on because no judge is going to save you. You have to be in control of what you're doing. And that takes familiarity with what's going on to get there.
I think the biggest thing that you're going to see is you need to be flexible. You need to not panic when inevitably some technology blip or glitch happens. Somebody's Wi-Fi connection goes out or something. It's beyond your control. But if you stay focused, if you're in the right mindset, and if you just say, oh, we're having some technical problems, instead of just sitting there and freaking out, you'll be fine. All right. So everyone I have found so far in all these trials I've seen on many levels people are willing to be flexible. And if you're willing to be flexible too, it goes better for you just in a mental headspace that you're not freaking out. But the judges will appreciate it too, that you are handling those things and not having them have to deal with also a foreign concept of judging on Zoom. One of the things that I have seen that can go well or go poorly are backgrounds. Your head is up there, and if you have a part where you're standing and let's say you want to cross and you want to stand because that's how we typically do things, you really have to plan for what's going to be seen. I mean, a plain like white wall seems to work best if you want to do that. And I think there's a lot of disagreement on whether or not you should even stand or not. Some judges want it, some don't, because you're too far away. It looks weird. You're not going to be able to move as well as you would in a courtroom because your space is limited. So think about your background. We had students that were competing in their dorm rooms, and they still won awards and we won tournaments and obviously didn't stop us. But if you can think about having a non, noisy, sort of loud, lots of things to look at, because when they don't want to look at your face anymore, they're going to look at what's in the background. So you also need to keep that. So you should not have your favorite, band picture, or whatever posters you have up in your room, or if there's some family photos, that they can start looking at, they're going to do those things. So be careful that you don't have. I know we had some college students that had things that were not appropriate up in their room that are fine for college dorm rooms, but not when you're supposed to be in a courtroom. And as Ben said, you have to really focus on getting in that headspace. I personally think that virtual backgrounds are hard because you get that glitchy edge to yourself, right? When you move, it's just, you get that pixelated, distracting view on the screen. So if you can have plain backgrounds, I would go with real plain backgrounds. But if you're going to pick a virtual one, I would also just pick a plain color that is bland, and not try to put something in a courtroom or something that, again, is going to be distracting and cause the judges to want to look somewhere else. The other thing you're going to want to pay attention to is the delay that happens. Your mic isn't going to pick anything up on Zoom. Your face isn't going to transition when you try to object. If you just go objection, relevance, and start going into everything, you're going to want to say objection, wait for the mic, wait to make sure that the judge has heard you, and then you might ask to be heard. Keep that in mind. It's not as quick back and forth for objections or question and answer with a witness, especially on cross. You have to be, I know everyone's tries to be careful about not cutting off witnesses. It's really going to happen on Zoom. You can't control if that other witness's connection has a delay, if yours has a delay. So apologize. The nice thing is, let's say you talk over the witness and it was intentional, or you were just trying to get them to shut up, you can actually blame Zoom and be like, oh, I'm sorry, I was delayed, if the judge is getting upset, right? Or the other team objects. But be very cognizant of the fact that it's going to take Zoom a second to realize you're talking and not the other team or the witness. So be really flexible with those technology changes, and try to be as professional as possible when something comes up.
On the flip side of that, if we're being, pure sophists that we are, if your witness is getting cross-examined, and even if unintentionally the other team steps on your witness or cuts off your witness, I object immediately now. I mean, the tip used to be to feel out the location. Are we in New York? Are we in the South? That would impact whether it's okay to cut off witnesses. The first crosser normally has to bite the bullet and do it and see what happens. I have completely coached out of that at this point. I am anti cutting off witnesses. I am objecting as soon as someone cuts off a witness, because it's just the etiquette of Zoom. And you don't want to get cut off when you're not face to face with somebody. It feels a little more rude than it did in person, because in person, at least you could say, well, judge is not answering the question. On Zoom, it's like they're trying to answer the question. We're in this medium that we're all trying to exist in, and you're taking advantage of it, or you're not giving them the time they need. So I've completely coached away from even trying to cut off witnesses as a witness control technique on cross, and coached towards policing that heavier on objecting on cross. Another thing that we've tried to, adapt with our coaching is how we move as attorneys, how we use space. We've had success in using different areas for examinations and statements. So, if you're at your house, maybe you're in your bedroom and it looks nice, it's got a plain background, you've made your bed, you've taken things off your bed that shouldn't be there. It's very plain and nice for examinations. You sit down at a desk and you do those. And then while your camera's off and you're preparing for a statement, maybe you go somewhere else in your home. You go to the hallway, or you go to the living room and you set your camera down at a good space, and then you have more space to move around. That's fine. We've seen people, obviously, that stay in the same room to do examinations and statements. I prefer standing to do statements and sitting to do examinations, I think. But while you're sitting, you need to be cognizant of the area that your camera is capturing, because you don't want to sacrifice hand movements or body language when you perform your examinations. So you're going to have to bring your hands up a little bit, up higher than the normal zone that we would use them, but you can't use them to cover your face. So if you do something like you take off glasses, or you have a pen in your hand, or you're using your hands in some way that normally you would raise your hands naturally, don't cover your face, don't cover your mouth, because there's a smaller area in which the judges can look at you because of how this camera is positioned. So bring your hands up, but be cognizant of how exactly far you can bring them up. Regardless of whether you're sitting or standing, everyone on your team needs to do it the same way. It's got to be uniform. That's one thing as a judge. If someone does it differently, it immediately stands out, and it's hardly ever positive. Either they're going to do it worse than the rest of the team, so they get dinged because they're different and worse, or the judge is going to prefer that and realize, oh my gosh, I actually prefer that over what the rest of the team is doing. So now the rest of the team has lost points. So everybody do it uniformly, standing, sitting for exams, statements, what have you. But movement has changed because of being on Zoom.
Yeah, and I'll echo what Ben is saying. Statements, it does seem to be better because you're going to be talking for a longer period of time, a sustained period of time. And you want to be able to move, you want to be able to emote, you want to be able to change those tones, variances, pace variances. You want to be more lively for that period of time to keep these judges focused on you. And you're going to need space. You really need to think about, if you just stand up behind your desk in your room or something and like, okay, I'm standing. First, think about that camera angle. How has that changed? Think about your mic. Is it going to pick you up as well if you don't have some sort of lapel mic or something? But then just because you're standing, if you don't move, I don't know that it helps you, right? So you need to think about space so that you can move, but then you only have a limited window of where your camera can see. So these are the things that you definitely need to play with and figure out. You don't have the freedom to move in a well like you would in a courtroom or a conference room or a classroom where everyone can see you as you go from left to right or forward and backward for a purpose. And I think pacing, it hasn't been seen as much because people are really focused on the camera, but I think it would be even worse if you're just back and forth, bouncing across my screen. Test it out. That's the great thing about Zoom, is you can test these things at practice and beforehand to make sure that you know exactly how much space that you need. It's not like you just walk into a random courtroom and you're learning on the fly. The other thing that you're going to want to make sure that you do, for exhibits, you might consider something like a Google Drive link that has all the exhibits, if you can do that, right? If your competing organization will let you do that, if they haven't done so ahead of time, it's pretty slick to just be like, here, judge, and throw it up in the chat. This is a link to everything that you're going to need on a Google Drive where it's all pre-marked for them and they can find everything. Help the judges. Your judges are either going to be actual attorneys or people in the legal field who are still struggling with Zoom just as much as you are, or even more so because this isn't how they use it with their firm or whatever. And so the more you can make it easy for them, the better, right? Makes sense. Or it's going to be somebody who has done mock trial a lot, and that's just a little thing that is going to look smooth, more professional. But have somebody handy to handle all the technology issues for you, so that you can say, hey, Ben, can you bring up exhibit 5? Now you're saying that to your co-counsel, but really it's, I don't know, Ashley behind the scenes here who is doing all of these things as the tech person. Don't fiddle with it yourself if you don't have to. If it's your direct examination and you can't have a design tech person, your other co-counsel need to be the one putting the stuff up on the screen and just call it out. Mr. Sailing, can you bring up exhibit 3? It's smooth and it shows that you're comfortable with the environment, and it just helps with time that you're not bending down, fiddling with things, and we have to hear you clicking on things. Makes it much smoother. Also, it's been nice if the Zoom functions that you have or whatever platform you're using has functionality where they can put arrows or highlight things. Do that as well. Again, it's something to put up on the screen that breaks up the monotony of what is going on of just talking back and forth and faces bouncing back and forth. But then you show that you're a smart attorney by saying, I need to make sure that the record knows what's going on, right? You still need to act like there's a transcript that's going to be made of this and say, may the record reflect that the witness is putting up an arrow on the left side of the map, right? So that someone reviewing it is going to say, okay, we know what's going on if there were an appeal. Now we know there's not going to be an appeal, but it's the procedure. It's the awareness of saying, I've got control of Zoom. And as an attorney, I know that this is what's going to have to be on the record. And if you do that, you might get your +1 that you need to win the ballot simply by being really aware of what the record is going to look like and then embracing what's going on with Zoom.
So when we talk about attorneys on Zoom, we're really focused on just a couple of areas. The first is the teamwork with exhibits. Like Neal just explained, this is really important to have someone else handle this than the performing attorney. You don't want to be bouncing back and forth from your computer to performance, to engaging, to boring, to slowing down. Someone on your team should be handling this, whether it's non-competing member or co-counsel. The second is to think about your space, whether it's, am I going to stand or sit? Am I going to go to a different area of my home to do this piece? Where are my hands? You need to run through these on Zoom, not just in person, not just how you would normally practice this, but on Zoom. Record it, watch yourself, see what works and see what doesn't. And the last thing is the general comments here about eye contact, plain backgrounds, the delay. Remember all of those things so that when you go into a Zoom courtroom, you know that you're performing to the best of your ability on Zoom, not just streaming what you would do in person, but perform on Zoom. And that will get you your +1.